Welcome back, Focus Learners. Today we're diving into this explainer on the truly groundbreaking insights from the book Nudge by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. Now, we normally kick things off with a detailed agenda, but honestly, we're going to skip all that today because I want to jump straight into a quick visual test to prove a massive point about exactly how your mind works.
Okay, let's dive into this. Take a look at these two tables. If you were, say, out shopping for a coffee table, how would you describe their shapes? Take a really quick guess at the ratio of the length to the width for each one. Just eyeball it. If you're like most of us, your brain is confidently telling you that the table on the left is much longer and narrower, like maybe a 3-to-1 ratio, while the one on the right looks, well, chunkier, right? Maybe a 1.5-to-1 ratio. You are probably completely 100% confident in that assessment. But check out what happens when we remove the legs and just rotate the tabletops. The dimensions are completely identical. And I don't mean just close, they are literally identical. So seeing is absolutely not always believing. And hey, this isn't a sign that there's something wrong with you. It really just proves that our human brains are inherently flawed. We are hardwired to see the world in ways that just aren't always strictly accurate. That little visual illusion perfectly sets up our first core concept, Section 1, humans versus econs, perfect versus flawed. Let's look at the huge contrast between the mythical beings you'd find in an economics textbook and the reality of everyday people walking around in the real world. So traditional economics basically assumes that we are all what the authors call Homo economicus, or econs for short. An econ is a perfect forecaster. They think like Albert Einstein, they have the memory capacity of Google, and they possess the infinite, unbreakable willpower of Mahatma Gandhi. But the rest of us, well, we are Homo sapiens. We're humans. We struggle with long division if we don't have our phone calculators, we occasionally forget an anniversary, and yep, we totally fall for visual illusions of coffee tables.
So the absolutely crucial points is captured right here. Unlike econs, humans make predictable mistakes. That word predictable is a real game changer. Our mistakes aren't just random, chaotic little stumbles. They actually follow very distinct patterns. And because they follow patterns, it means we can study them, understand them, and ultimately design our world to help us make better decisions.
Moving on to Section 2, fast and slow thinking, 2 cognitive systems. To actually understand why we make these systematic errors, we need to transition to the underlying mechanics of our brains. Like, how can we be so incredibly smart, yet sometimes so easily fooled?
It really all comes down to 2 cognitive systems. Over here on the left, we have the automatic system. This thing is fast, it's intuitive, totally unconscious, and totally effortless. It's what makes you instantly duck when a baseball comes flying at your head. Then on the right, we have the reflective system. This one is slow, very deliberate, highly controlled, and rule-following. It's the system you fire up to learn a complex new language or grind through a tough math problem. And this beautifully explains the paradox of human intelligence. We can be simultaneously brilliant enough to compose a whole symphony using our reflective system, but clueless enough to fall for a simple table illusion because our automatic system got totally tricked.
Because life is so incredibly hard and complex, we can't possibly use our slow, energy-draining, reflective system for everything. Just imagine if you used it for every single purchase at the grocery store, sitting there calculating the absolute optimal nutritional value per cent for every single item in your cart. You would literally never make it home. So our automatic system takes over, relying on mental shortcuts or rules of thumb to help us navigate daily life efficiently. Which brings us to Section 3, rules of thumb and biases, how shortcuts go wrong. Now, what's really interesting here is we are going to do a rapid-fire catalog of the specific heuristics, these mental rules of thumb that routinely trip up our automatic system. First up, we've got anchoring. This is our tendency to start with a known number, an anchor, and then adjust our guess in the direction we think is right. The bias kicks in because we almost never adjust enough. Even completely ridiculously irrelevant numbers can severely warp our final judgments. Actually, let's try this right now. Think of the last 3 digits of your phone number. Got it? Okay, now tell me, did Attila the Hun sack Europe before or after that year? And what's your exact guess for the year it actually happened? When researchers run this test, they consistently find that people with high phone numbers guess hundreds of years later than people with low phone numbers. Your brain anchors on your phone number, even though it obviously has absolutely nothing to do with the year 452. Crazy, right? The next mental shortcut is the availability heuristic. This is what happens when we assess the likelihood of a risk by just asking ourselves how easily examples come to mind. Super vivid memories or really heavy news coverage drastically inflate our perception of risk simply because those images are highly available in our brains. Let's put this one to the test too. In the United States, are more gun deaths caused by homicides or suicides? Most people immediately, instinctively guess homicides. And why? Because homicides are heavily reported on the evening news. They are highly available to our memory. But the really surprising fact here is that gun-inflicted suicides are actually double the number of homicides. Our automatic system assesses the risk based on the news cycle, completely missing the actual statistical reality. Then we have representativeness, which is basically a similarity heuristic. We judge how likely it is that something belongs to a category by how closely it matches our existing stereotype of that category. And unfortunately, this causes us to basically toss basic logic out the window in favor of a really compelling narrative. Let's look at the famous Linda logic puzzle. So Linda is 31, she's outspoken, and she's very bright. As a philosophy major, she was deeply concerned with social justice. Now rank the probability for me. Is she a bank teller, or is she a bank teller who is active in the feminist movement? Most people say she is far more likely to be a feminist bank teller. But logically, that is impossible. All feminist bank tellers are, by definition, bank tellers. It cannot possibly be more likely that she belongs to a smaller subcategory. But our brains pick the specific subset anyway, just because it perfectly fits the stereotype provided in her description. Finally, we have loss aversion and status quo bias. Humans absolutely hate losing things roughly twice as much as we enjoy gaining them. This fuels a massive status quo bias, basically a severe inertia where we just stick with our current situation. The author, Cass Sunstein, actually tells this highly relatable story where he once received some free 3-month magazine subscriptions. When they ended, he got trapped paying for magazines he didn't even read for an entire decade. Why? Simply because canceling required an active effort. We just say, yeah, whatever, and let the status quo roll right on. Section 4. The power of choice architecture. Designing decisions. So let's zoom out from the individual mind for a second and see what happens when all these mental glitches interact with the environments designed by other people around us. And this brilliantly illustrates that point. Consider the data on taxi tipping defaults. When credit card machines were first added to cabs, some companies offered tip default buttons of 15, 20, and 25%, but others offered 20, 25, and 30%. Merely changing the on-screen defaults drastically increased driver earnings because our anchoring and status quo biases make us extremely likely to just tap a middle button. But researchers also noted something fascinating. If you push the default too high, you trigger something called reactance. Basically, people feel ordered around, they get mad, and they tip absolutely nothing. Now, this brings us to a really fascinating ethical dilemma about design. Let's introduce a hypothetical cafeteria manager named Carolyn. She discovers that simply rearranging where the food is displayed completely changes what the kids eat. Put desserts first, they eat more sweets. Put carrots at eye level, they eat healthier. She has to put the food somewhere, right? So what does she do? She could choose randomly, but that's just chaotic. She could try to figure out what they'd choose on their own, but we literally just learned their choices are dictated by the layout itself. She could take bribes from suppliers or just blindly maximize profit. Or she can arrange it to encourage better health. The huge lesson here is profound. There is absolutely no such thing as a neutral design. Carolyn is acting as what we call a choice architect. A choice architect is anyone who organizes the context in which people make decisions. If you're designing a voting ballot, the layout of an office building, a website's drop-down menu, or a retirement savings form, you are actively influencing human behavior. In the Amsterdam airport, architects famously etched a tiny little image of a housefly into the men's urinals, giving a target that dramatically improved aim and reduced spillage. Seemingly arbitrary details have massive impacts on us. Okay, let's move into our final section. Section 5. What is a nudge? Discerning for good. So, knowing we're all flawed humans navigating spaces designed by choice architects, what's the actual solution? The solution, my friends, is a nudge. A nudge is any aspect of choice architecture that alters people's behavior in a predictable way without forbidding any options or significantly changing their economic incentives. Now, to be crystal clear, a nudge must be cheap and incredibly easy to avoid. Putting the fruit at eye level in the cafeteria totally counts as a nudge. Banning junk food by law absolutely does not. A nudge isn't a tax and it isn't a fine. It is just a helpful starting point.
This whole philosophy is called libertarian paternalism. Now, I know those words sound like a total contradiction, but together they really make sense. It is libertarian because it fiercely preserves your freedom to choose. You can always opt out. It is paternalistic only in the sense that it deliberately tries to steer choices in a direction that will actually improve people's lives. It's a paternalism of means, not ends. It's simply about using smart design to help people navigate toward their own preferred destinations, overcoming those automatic biases we talked about without ever restricting their actual freedom.
Which leaves us with this final, really important thought to consider. You now know that your brain relies on predictable shortcuts, and that literally every menu, form, and room you encounter has been purposely arranged by someone. So, knowing your brain's predictable biases, who are the choice architects designing the environments in your daily life? Are the defaults you blindly click on your phone, at your bank, or at your job nudging you toward your best interests or someone else's? Take a close look around today and see just how many nudges you can spot. Keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.